All right, today we're going to show you how to do a rose. We're going to get this in and out. I'm not here to bore you. I'm not here to steer you. Let's go. I'm going to show you how I do my way. That didn't really have a chance to dry, but it's okay. We know how to draw, so we're going to just work right through it. And I already see all the points where I need to hit. And we're going to let's get, that's something I did the other day. So I have to finish the flower on top and add a few more highlights, and then we're going to finish with that. I just want to start over. All right, if you're a beginner, strap on. We're going from beginning to end. First of all, we're going to have our triple black. So boomski, the reason why I do this is because I like the way how it gives me a nice grayish smooth feel. Very opaque. You feel me? Okay, and then on top of that, we have to have our white in the back. So with this rose, we're gonna have a 15 round shade in the back, and then we're gonna have a 7 round liner for the front standard. The reason why I like to do that is because I want to have a nice bold edge. The reason why is because I'm also imagining this on brown skin. If you imagine this on brown skin, you're gonna want to make sure that you have nice thick lines. When you're doing these lines, you want to think of some things. Number one, when we're using a round shader, we're hitting in tight circular motions, okay? Number two, when we are going over a certain number in our round shader, for example, if it's like an 11 round shader, or let's say a 14, 15, we need to sort of have a understanding of where our hand speed is and understand where our voltage is. Sometimes our voltage needs to be at a higher gear or speed in order to really make sure that the higher needle group is actually being able to really punch in. Another thing, when you are actually using a round shader and just going and dragging lines, that's why it's essential to make sure that you have the right voltage. If you're not using the tight circular motions, right, then if you're just gonna pull a straight line, you want to make sure you have the right voltage. That way it's saturated evenly. Sometimes that's a problem. So at this point, I realized, okay, half of this stencil is wiping away. Let me stop playing. I'll start just pulling lines. And again, you're gonna see I'm gonna have to go over it. But the whole point of me just pulling these lines at first was really just so I have the base. Sometimes it's more important for you to just have the base than to just sit there and basically play all day trying to do this one area and half of your stencil or almost the whole stencil is gone. So to me, I like to just basically map out, get everything in, get all the lines in, and then now we focus on all of the readability and what we need to get in. That's why I think it's very important to understand where how to draw, and as well too, knowing where things are, knowing where things are supposed to be located, and you can sort of see and have an angle to know, okay, well, no, this lines up over here or this lines up over there. I use my 7 round liner for the inside because I don't want too much of a thick lines. I want thick lines for where it matters, and I want very dainty, small, almost non-visible lines. That way it still gives it that realism feel. By the time I wipe this, I almost cried. I said, God damn, but it's okay. We really a dog out here, you heard me? We really a dog. Okay, hold on, lock in. You feel me? We really locking in. Anyway, back to it. So now I'm over here making sure all my lines is nice and thick. You feel me? At this time, I got the little curved mag. That's what's about to be playing out into this action. I'm using my black and I'm packing it. You heard me? Alright, so boomski. All we doing is we following this reference. We not gonna make it hard. We not gonna make it hard. You feel me? That's what you need to be telling yourself while you're doing this. We not gonna make it hard. So what I'm doing is I'm following the reference and I'm hitting all the black areas first. The reason why I say hit all the black areas first is because sometimes what I definitely realized when I first started was I was way too goddamn mid-tone heavy. And me being mid-tone heavy means that all it is that when the tattoo actually heals out, that it almost looks so dull. There's no actual black that's bringing it to life. And even in this piece, I felt like I could have done even more black. I want everyone to understand, and everyone who's watching, I don't think I'm no guru. I don't think I'm the best. But guess what? I'm going to reach for it. I'm going to make sure I strive for it. I'm going to keep on sitting here and digging apart my work to get to where I want to be. So right now, I'm just sitting here and packing in the black in the areas that it needs to be. And as well, if you notice my hands, I'm sort of pushing it. I'm pushing it up and down, as well as too. So here's something that I've actually learned about myself while I was doing this. When you're packing in your black, you have to make sure that your hand stays inside the skin. That's what causes streaky lines. This is something that I've noticed while I'm doing this, and this is the importance of using fake skin and just sitting there taking your time and really just locking in. While I'm really sitting there taking my time, I notice, wait a minute, you keep low-key picking up your hand, which gives it this streaky movement or look. So I want you to know that when you're actually packing in your black, it's either you're doing a push where it's like you're going, but you're making sure you stay inside the skin, or you're doing a circular motion and you're working in the tight area. That's the best way to make sure that you stay and have an actual solid black fill. Now over here, I'm packing in that 80, and then I move on. And where you see this really like grayish scale, that's normally either sometimes I've sat there and I've dipped it, cleaned out my needle, and I've dipped it in white, and then I've chose my tone. So now what that does is gives it a very opaque-ish feel, and it makes it very easier to me to be able to not have streaky looks or streaky feelings. This is what helps me be able to get that soft airbrushy look. All right, so I do that, and you have to build up your tone with all of these things. Everything you do, you have to build up. Don't ever forget that. So now I'm going back and I'm packing in my blacks. What I like to do is I like to use my blacks first. I like to pack in my black first, and then I sort of get to see and play with the mid-tone to have an idea of how deep do I want the mid-tone. When you're trying to figure out how deep you want the mid-tone, I feel like having black right next to it is a good choice, because that's obviously the darkest hue, the darkest shade, the darkest value. So here I just give you just an idea of what type of shades that I'm using, so that way I can achieve. When you're trying to get like a deep or show depth, you want to be able to really just sit there and use different tones and different values. That's what helps really push your contrast and push your depth into the roles, as you can see. I'm working on several different areas. By the way, this was the most cheapest tissue I've ever had in my life. Oh my God. But it's okay. I'm only going to use it for fake skin. Just so y'all know, cheap tissue like this that's breaking off like that, don't ever be using that for nobody's real skin. You don't ever want that actual tissue or pieces of paper to be breaking off in somebody's skin. So this tissue is definitely just good for like practice fake skin. Just want to throw that out there. So just in case if you got that, don't do that. All right, so we back to it. So now here, I'm really just trying to just build up my tones and just trying to see, after I packed in all my black, now I could sort of have an idea of, okay, where do I want to put all my medium tones and where do I want to lay all my light tones? I'm not trying to make this hard for myself. You see that? So now it's time where I sit here and I build up my tones for the middle. This is where I'm trying to get the details for the inside of the rose. The reason why I use the medium tone, which is I believe the 80%, and maybe like not the 60 or 40, I don't want it to be too dark, but I don't want it to be too light. I still want it to be able to show some form of depth inside of it. So that's when I actually just sat there and I just went over it a couple of times. So as you can see from some of them, it's not like a one pass or a two pass thing. It's sort of like you just go in the area multiple times. As you can see, I'm just sort of just going over and over, and I'm just sort of just building it up, and I'm using my 15 curve mag. That way it gives it a nice smooth feel. You don't want it to be hard lines. This isn't hard, rough looking, sharp lines. This is nice, soft, elegant lines. So when we want soft, we go with our mag. When we want nice and sharp, then you need to think your liner. Okay, so because I want nice and soft, I'm gonna continue using my mag, 15 curve mag, and we're gonna just keep on moving from there. This being said, I always like to add my details towards the ends. Before, I used to realize I was sitting there and adding my details in the beginning. I feel like as a beginning artist, sometimes you want to sit there and pack so much detail in the beginning at one time, and that's just not the way how it goes. You're supposed to technically just wait till the end, where that's where you really sort of put your finishing touches, and that's where it really comes alive. So as you can see, as I start adding more and more depth and more I guess the pieces that showed the depth inside the rose, all of a sudden I felt like the rose started to come more and more alive. And that's honestly what we want, right? So I went over back in certain areas. I like to hit certain areas again, like my blacks or some certain high mid-tones, just to make sure that my depth is really where it needs to be. I just want to make sure I'm also not sitting here and overly shading. That's also another thing. You don't need to be sitting here and overly shading. You need to know where your light areas are and where, again, if we're just following the reference, where do you see your midtones, where do you see your light tones, and where do you see your blacks? We're not going to make it hard. And that's just really the point of how you can really just keep this as simple as possible. And that's the goal. My name is Ingbar Ra, and I want you to see how I did. Let me know in the comments.